recently I read Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke.
I really want this edition of, what is it, Doctor Strange and Mr. Norrell?
And with that gift card I picked up Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier.
I really need to read this book. I need to read du Maurier.
But yes, these are the books that I chose out for you, Matthew, from my book hauls and wrap-ups of this year.
You know, I think Ashleigh has come up with a better list than I have. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into Exeter, into Waterstone, and I'm going to buy the 5 books that Ashleigh suggested for me.
Dear Ashleigh, in April, I asked you to suggest 5 books from your TBR and book haul videos of the year so far. I then bought all those books, and here is how I found them. So I'm going to do this wrap-up video a little bit different to, I guess, how it's usually done. What I want to do is, I want to, first of all, look at what Ashleigh said about the book and why she thought I would enjoy it. I'm going to then talk about the star rating, what I rated it, and why, listing a few key points that kind of swayed my opinion when I was finally rating it. And now I have a cat in front of me. So, let's get started. The first book that Ashleigh suggested was this one, England, England by Julian Barnes. Now this was probably the biggest risk for Ashleigh since she hadn't read it. She didn't really know so much about it and she still hasn't read it yet to date. So let's have a look at what she said as to why she chose this book for me.
Now in my mind you're someone who very much likes to read about or analyse aspects of society and culture. Now while that might not be English culture, I do think that this book might bring up questions that you find particularly interesting, or even just elements that you might be able to twist into your other areas of interest. Julian Barnes seems like a really popular author as well, and when I have a quick flick through, the text seems to have small quirks about it that might make it a little bit more interesting, and on the back it also says that it calls into question ideas of reality versus art, nationhood, myth-making, and those are kind of things that I associate with you, because you do tend to analyse art and you just delve into areas of society like that.
I'll be very interested to see if and when Ashleigh does get to this book. I feel like for Ashleigh, it's not the kind of book that she would enjoy. She could definitely enjoy it if she dissects it from as if she's in class or something, doing an English literature analysis of the book, because there's a lot here to unpack and a lot to really think about and to examine. But I don't think it would be one that Ashleigh would generally be drawn to for pleasure. But, you know, she might surprise me. So let's talk about the star rating and some few points that I enjoyed most from it and those that I didn't enjoy so much. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. The writing style definitely captures the imagination and is very unique, and it works perfectly for the story that is being told. I think also this book is highly important for our current time. Even though it was first published in 1998, it still feels very current. Not only in the way that British are currently at risk in their identity with Brexit and being part of the European Union or not being it, and the new rise of nationalistic pride, which is quite damaging. The rhetoric surrounding the current climate in what does it mean to be British is definitely reflected within this book. But we also have a character that seems almost Trump-like, which again feels very current. I like that this book had a lot of interesting questions that were being raised and answered within the text. It brought to light lots of different ideas around the concept of being British and what that truly means, and how does Britishness sell almost as a commodity and as a brand. One of the things I didn't like so much was I think the author tried to pack in a little too much. A lot was going on, and I did feel that a lot of stuff went over my head, but the things that didn't go over my head, I definitely enjoyed. The things that did go over my head, I don't think I lost anything from not knowing them. So I did knock off that 1 extra star just because of that, and at times it was a bit difficult to push through certain parts of the text when I was probably missing the undercurrent themes of it. So would I recommend this book to many people? It's difficult to say. I think a lot of people could get on board with it and could enjoy it for what it is, but a lot of people, again, would really hate it. So it would all very much depend on the person. And I'm glad that Ashleigh suggested it for me, because I am definitely the kind of person who would enjoy this. So then the next book that I read from Ashleigh's list was this one, The Children of Jocasta by Natalie Haynes. Now, I was umming and ahhing about whether to buy this or not, because I wasn't so keen on the cover for the paperback. But Ashleigh suggested it, so I went and bought it. So let's have a look at what Ashleigh said about it.
Now this one I chose out because you've been interested in similar books, basically. I know that you've read The Song of Achilles and really enjoyed that one, and I think you've expressed interest in reading Circe by Madeline Miller too, and this one just sounds like it's in the same vein. This book also reminds me of the February videos you did, and even the ones where you pair up a book to a film director, because I think in those you've mentioned you would like a director to focus the story from someone else's perspective, which is exactly what this book does. So I feel like this might be one that you enjoy, one, out of pure entertainment, and two, for the new perspective given on an ancient story.
Now, I knew I wanted to read this, not only because of the cover for the hardback, but because, like Ashleigh said, I had read The Song of Achilles and really enjoyed it, and I was interested in reading Circe. I do like the sort of Greek mythology retelling trend that is happening now. I would be interested in seeing lots of other different kinds of mythologies being retold, but whether they have the more commercial appeal is questionable. But let's go now and have a look at what I liked the most, what I didn't like, and what star rating I gave it. So overall, I ended up giving it a 3-star rating. Now, the things that I did like about this text was, of course, the story. It introduced me to characters from the Greek canon, which I hadn't known about before, and it told the story in a way that I wasn't expecting it to be told. It was a fast read, I could get through it, I was absorbed within the story for the whole time, and from beginning to end, the pacing of the prose kept me going and kept the story driving forwards, and that in itself is always an enjoyable part of reading. You don't want to be muddied down by things that become too slow and too painful to get through. However, it was not all fun and games. I personally couldn't get on board with the feminist agenda behind this text. It was done in a way that didn't make sense to the story. To both stories that were being told, not only the Antigone but to the Oedipus story. The author messed with the stories in ways that, you know, I wasn't pleased with. I know the stories, I don't know them intimately, but I know of them, and I know that this book plays with the stories in ways that completely changes them and provides a more happier ending for the women. There are ways of creating a story that is feminist without having to actually alter the ending of the women or to sort of give them their happy ending. The narrative was also split by two, so half the narrative was told from Jocasta's perspective and half the narrative was told from Ismene's perspective, and then we alternated between their perspectives, so there was 2 different timelines happening and then they kind of converged towards the end. Now, I didn't like this either because this is the decision that the author made to push the plot forward, in that at the end of every chapter we were left with some really cheap cliffhanger which annoyed me. I didn't need that either. I would have kept going without those cliffhangers, and it was too heavy-handed. It wasn't done well, it wasn't executed well. I also don't like the representation of the villain in this story. It didn't make sense, it didn't work. The reasons for the villain being the villain were useless, and that made for the believability of his actions to be kind of non-existent. So I know that Ashleigh hasn't got to this book yet, and she is definitely excited for it. Ashleigh has definitely been getting more into history and the classics and the ancient Greek retellings, so I'm wondering whether she will enjoy this or not. I think there is a lot here for her to enjoy, but I also think there's a lot that could go wrong in which she would be put off by. I think this one is kind of on the precipice for her, and so I'm very keen to see in which side that she falls in liking or disliking this book. So yeah, 3 stars I think is very fair for this book. So the next book that I read was this one, is The Passion by Jeanette Winterson. It was about time I finally got to Jeanette Winterson. So let's see the reasons why Ashleigh said I would enjoy this book.
Now with this one I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because you have told me that you're interested in this book. But out of all the books that I've read this year so far, I feel like this one is the one that would probably suit you the most anyway, so I probably would have chosen it had you not commented on that video and said you were interested. I think this is a book that has really interesting dynamics between characters as well, which I feel like you might enjoy, Matthew. And as I mentioned in my video, it does have quite lyrical writing that suits the magical realism aspect of it perfectly, and that is the side that you said you were particularly interested in. So I do think that this one might be for you.
So as you can see, Ashleigh had read this book, and of course I had already shown an interest in this book. So it was about time I definitely picked it up. Let's have a look at how I rated it, what I liked and what I didn't like. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars also. What I liked about it was the idea of it. It is obviously called The Passion because it explores what the passion means. What is passion? Particularly in reference to the Passion of the Christ and into reference of passion of romance. And it was very interesting how it kind of explored that word. And I loved Villanelle as a character. Now her story, I think, could have been the only story of this text and been a shorter book, a novella, and made this book perfect. It explores the passion within a lesbian relationship and that first sort of inkling to passion that you have for somebody that you haven't experienced before, and it really makes you question what love means and what does it mean to become obsessed with somebody. And her storyline was incredible and I was constantly invested in everything that was happening around her. She is such a well thought out and well-rounded character, and she has a lot of depth to her that I was fascinated by. However, on the other hand, the other character, Henri, he had a really boring story and I just felt his storyline was so pointless. And when it first started, I was struggling to continue reading this book because at the start, from Henri's perspective, it was just telling something that I had no interest in reading about, and it happened to be the end too, where we followed Henri's character in the end and I was just done with him. And that kind of really disappointed me. And also, another thing about this book was, again, there was a lot that I didn't understand about this text. And this one felt a little bit more on the pretentious side, in the fact that there are so many literary allusions to the Bible and to the Christian faith, which I know nothing about Christianity. I have had no interest in it. It's not something that I believe in. And I only know the basic stories from the Bible in which we are told in my primary school. So it kind of frustrated me that this book sort of used the Bible as a text to explore lots of different things. So this book ultimately wasn't for me in that respect, and it kind of made it difficult for me to actually gel with it and to get on board with it, and that's why for me it felt a little bit pretentious, because it was working off the basis that the reader would have knowledge of these things, which I think is unfair to assume of your readers. Definitely one that could have been better had it been a novella about Villanelle only. So yeah, so I feel quite undecided about it and whether or not I would suggest it to other people. I think a lot of people could actually get a lot out of it. I'm glad I definitely read it though. Definitely glad I read it. So then the next book that Ashleigh suggested was John Wyndham's The Day of the Triffids.
I don't know whether you've mentioned to me before that you want to read this one, but for some reason this is one that I automatically jumped to when you set me up with this challenge. I feel like if you were to pick up a sci-fi, it would be this kind of sci-fi that's more unique. Not necessarily space battles and technology, but more just something major has gone wrong on Earth and it's alien to us and we need to figure out what it is. I myself am also particularly interested to see how the society in this adapts to everybody going blind, because as you can imagine, society isn't fit for the entire population to not be able to see. And I feel like that might be something that you yourself are interested in as well, Matthew.
Now, if you had watched my mid-year review, you would know how I feel about this. So let's talk about the star rating and my likes and my dislikes. So I ended up giving this book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I loved the plot, I loved the way that the story developed, I loved the character development too, and the character's arc, and I particularly loved the ending. It wasn't an ending that sort of glorified humans above nature, and it wasn't an ending that fulfilled the reader's dreams. It was an ending that I felt was very realistic and suited the whole text. I think the language of this book was probably one of my biggest worries before I went in, but actually the language was really accessible. The language itself has a timeless feel to it. It's not stuck in its time that it was written in. It is very much still current today. I feel this book was very ahead of its time, especially in the representation of women. It actually gave the female characters some depth and explored different areas of their identities that these female characters had felt were not able to be explored in their own lives before the cataclysmic change in the society, which I found really interesting. And I also enjoyed the premise of this book and the sort of fear that had been instilling the society at the time this book was written, in which was, you know, amid the Cold War and amid this fear of man-made products and genetically modified biological products, and also the role of man versus nature and the assumed superiority of man over nature. And I must say, having read it, I think this is one of those books that I would be safe in saying a lot of people would enjoy. It is SFF, but in a way that is still very much grounded and easily accessible to people who don't read the genre. It has its literary merit in a way that the language that is used captures the sense of the story and explores themes, but again, in a way that is very accessible to all level of readers. And I'm really, really glad to have read it, and I am looking forward to reading The Chrysalids next. So the final book that I read from Ashleigh's suggestion was South Sea Tales by Robert Louis Stevenson. Now, Ashleigh was unsure about suggesting this to me, so let's have a look to see why she was unsure about it.
Now, I've not seen you read many classics besides the Penguin Little Black classics, but I feel like if you were to pick up a classic, this is one of the more understated ones that you might appreciate more than the typical literary canon types like Jane Austen or the Bronte sisters. As you might imagine, it has aspects of culture behind it as well. However, it is written during a time of colonialism, so it does have quite a bit of racist content in there, just to warn you off that. However, as far as enjoyment goes, it is quite a dark set of stories inspired by the mythologies and folktales of another culture, and I think that might be something you are particularly interested in based off what I've seen you read before.
So given what Ashleigh said, this book actually sounded so much up my street. It was everything that she thought I would enjoy out of it were exactly topics that I thought I would enjoy out of it. So let's have a look at how I rated it and what I liked and didn't like about this book. I ended up giving this book 2 stars. I couldn't get on board with it at all. I really struggled to read through it, and there wasn't a lot that I could really get from it. And I don't know whether it is because it is a classic, and I am not a fan of reading the classics. I don't like the language that is used. I don't like the rhetoric behind what is being said, and I don't get on with usually the stories that are being told in the classics. This one in particular, there was a selection of stories, and I found that every single story started off really slow and painfully and just overspilling with information that I didn't want to know about. And then towards the end, the stories did get a little bit more interesting and did pick up. I don't trust the voice of the narrator, and I don't trust Stevenson's experiences of the time. You know, he lived in Samoa, but the way that he lived in Samoa and the way that these stories had been told don't in any way actually portray the culture. I think I would have preferred this text to be a non-fiction text in which talked about the folktales actually as they were, rather than kind of being inspired by them. I didn't like the lack of cultural information. There was a lot of very logistical information, which was just so boring, but there was very little cultural explanation, and also the cultural explanation that was there was very much through a white man's perspective. I must say that I think it was very fair that Ashleigh did suggest this to me, because on paper it's exactly the kind of book that I would enjoy. Its execution, however, was something that just really turned me off and I really couldn't get into. So unfortunately, I didn't like this one. And I mean, Ashleigh was unsure as to whether I would or not. So I probably wouldn't recommend this to anyone. I assume people read it because they study it. So actually, overall, I must say, I think it was a really good read and challenge. And although I had 1 2-star, 2 3 stars, a 4-star and a 5-star, I think that overall, the books themselves were good books. And I would say, despite South Sea Tales, all of them could be ones that could be enjoyed by lots of people. And I totally understand why Ashleigh suggested them to me. And it was really interesting to read them and to consider what I have put out there, of what people kind of know about me and would then put back to me through books. And I think within that selection, there was a really wide mix of books, which was perfect for me and which kind of gave me the opportunity to really feel lots of different things and to refine my taste a little bit better also. So thank you, Ashleigh, for suggesting those books. I'm really glad I did this. I think if anybody wants to do this tag, the Parasite book tag, I know a few people are put off by the name because God forbid we have any drama on BookTube, but I feel a lot of people would really enjoy this tag. So if you want to do this tag, please go do it. You can either look at my channel and get some books from me, or go to another one of your BookTube friends and ask them for recommendations from videos that they've made. But definitely have a go at this tag. It was a really great experience, and I'm sorry to have wrapped it up so late since reading the books, but it's done now, and I'm really pleased to have done it. And thank you, Ashleigh, for joining me in this experience and for giving me these suggestions. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you for another one. Bye bye.